Batty has arrived, and welcome to the studio, which is the dining room table, you might have noticed.
It's a great pleasure to be here in the studio. I think the only radio studio in the heart of my electorate here in the eastern suburbs of Adelaide.
Well, it might interest you to know that radio, not just radio in Australia, commercial radio began. Does your electorate... Here's a picture of it, actually. It started...
Look at this.
Jack and Stella Hume's home down on Green Hill Road at Parkside. Is that still in your electorate?
It's just on the wrong side of Glen Osmond Roads.
The ocean.
Yeah, so Parkside sometimes moves in and out, but it's not far. It's a stone's throw from my electorate, Parkside.
Well, that's close enough.
Exactly right.
It's close enough. That's how radio started 100 years ago, 1924, and that was the beginning of radio, commercial radio, 5DN. When you look at the stuff that's on that table and the stuff that's on this table, thanks to Tony Denton, I mean, we've got a computer and a small mixer and a mobile phone, and that's it.
and you're going out to the world.
And we go to the world.
Incredible.
Yeah, I know. What were you doing before you got into politics?
Well, I'm a lawyer who was working in Adelaide, but immediately before entering Parliament, and I only entered a couple of years ago, I'm the newest member of our lower house Liberal Party team.
Yeah.
But before that, I was working in diplomacy. I worked at the Australian High Commission in London, there on the Strand, for those who might have visited or might be tuning in from London, perhaps.
Well, you don't know.
And I worked for George Brandis when he was Australia's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom.
Yes, so I know him. We used to talk regularly.
He's a great man, and he was a good boss and a great sort of mentor to me. So I was there for just over 3 years, working on all sorts of diplomacy and the Australia-UK relationship.
Mm-hmm. What's the case or the occasion or the crisis?
Well, I was there for COVID for most of it, so it sort of changed the experience.
So you were locked down?
We experienced lockdown. You know, you're in a bit of trouble when the pubs in London shut. That is a crisis, Jeremy. But look, you know, you take these jobs and you're promised parties and trips to Europe every second weekend, and I can tell you that dried up pretty quickly.
Diplomatic number plates, they're useful.
All that sort of stuff. You can park wherever you want with it.
Park wherever you want. Oh, yeah.
But instead, we sort of found ourselves locked down and found ourselves dealing with probably one of the biggest consular crises seen when the borders shut. There were so many Australians who were trying to get home and couldn't. Often they needed to get home for really good reason as well. They were, sick themselves or so on.
Qantas wouldn't fly, a lot of them, and I think it was Qatar. Airlines that
That's right.
the heavy lifting.
Qatar kept flying. I mean, it was very difficult for the commercial airlines at the time because Australia, and I understand why, but they imposed a cap on the number of people that could enter the country, which meant basically on any flight, 30 people on it, and it's not really very commercially efficient to fly a jet across the country with only 30 people on it.
No.
So what ended up happening is, you'd pay a fortune, or you couldn't get home.
Yeah.
But it was a fascinating time to be. COVID sort of overtook everything in terms of the consular crisis, but we worked on the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement during my time there as well. That was negotiations commenced when I was there, and then a year later we signed that deal. And I think the story for us here in Adelaide is that the deal was obviously signed in counterpart and virtually. The UK end was signed where I was in London, but the Australian end was actually signed right here in Adelaide, which I think symbolically, if nothing else, shows the importance of these deals for our state.
Well, the nation of Australia was drawn up in, what was it now? Chester.
Not all that far.
Well, there's Chester Cellars, which was a restaurant, Primo K on. I understand Primo died the other day too. He was one of the great restaurateurs. And Chester was a downstairs restaurant, and upstairs there was a sort of a long room, and to this day, I believe, it's no longer a restaurant, but the table that our founding fathers sat around and drew up the Constitution, it is still there.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I haven't
A museum,
you
or
would have thought so.
well, that whole building should have more significance than it does. Why are so many politicians lawyers? Is that the way in?
Although, well, there is no ordinary pathway in, and I guess for me, it probably looks like a typical pathway. I was a lawyer. I was sort of a weird kid who joined the Young Liberals at age 16, and you play Liberal Party politics. And
is that because of a Liberal family, or
not at all? Actually, my family particularly political at all. I sort of just got involved and interested. I did a lot of high school debating, actually, which sort of exposes you to a lot of the issues of the day. And I think the more I sort of started debating these issues, the more you become interested in them and you want to take an active part. So I think my family were probably walked into the Liberal Party and said, I'd like to be a member, please. But I think the beauty of it, and being in Parliament as a relatively new member, is that there are lots of people from all walks of life sitting in that Parliament. So I think for every lawyer, there's probably a farmer. You've got a vet, you've got sports people, you've got people who've come from really all walks of life.
Is it one thing, that's all I can stand, I can't stand no more. I was going to go to Canberra or to North Terrace and I was going to change the world.
Yeah.
Is it that, or a whole bunch of things? I'm a Liberal and I'm a Labor.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does the Labor Party these days have to sign the Socialist Pledge? It used to.
Well, they certainly federally seem to be all signed up to the pledge. So yeah. I think the Liberal Party is in some ways quite different to the Labor Party because we probably have less sort of career politicians. Most people I look at in the state parliament from the Labor Party have come up through the union movement. They're all members of a union. They all owe their union often their seat in. Whereas the Liberal Party really is, it's it's a liberal value that it's celebrating the individual, right?
It's a broad church.
And it's a broad church. Yeah. So as a result, we do get lots of different types of people who have different views, and that's a really, really good thing. We're also very democratic. Liberal candidate in a particular area, it's all the Liberal Party members who live in that area who get to decide whether or not you're the candidate. It's not sort of groups of people sitting around in smoke-filled rooms deciding who the candidate should be, as often happens in the Labor Party.
Well, if you look at the last 100 years in power, more often, much more often, what do you think makes this state a Labor state?
Yeah, well, I think it doesn't help that, half the state seems to be on the payroll.
What an interesting observation.
That's what we're dealing with. So I think the Liberal Party is always starting a little bit behind sort of the 8 ball when we're heading to an election with such a big and bloated public service. But all we can do, I think, is keep celebrating Liberal values, holding. There's a lot not to be happy about with this state Labor government.
What are Liberal values?
Well, I mean,
you see, I'm a Conservative. Yeah. I don't. It's funny, isn't it? In America, a Liberal is a lefty,
horrible lefty. Liberal Party values, I think, have been sort of enunciated over a century, really, from sort of Deakin to Menzies with his seminal statement of what we believe in and the individual and small government and low taxing.
Whatever happened to small government?
I know. And you've got a state Labor government here with Peter Malinowskis pretend that he has a small government, he's a pro-business Labor government. I think he likes to pretend that he's a Liberal a little bit.
Well, actually, I mean, I think he would make a terrific Liberal.
Well, maybe, because he goes around sort of in the guards and he sits.
Why don't we take him to lunch and see if we can convert him?
Well, we My worry is he takes other people to lunch and pulls them all over their eyes.
Oh,
and
God.
He sits around boardroom tables claiming to be this sort of pro-business government. But we've got to judge by their actions as well. And there's actually nothing particularly small government or pro-business about this lately. We had the state budget only probably a month ago now, and this is the highest taxing state government we've had in our history, in the history of the state. So for all the rhetoric around Peter Malinowskis being sort of this palatable centrist Labor Party premier, are we years ago?
As a presenter, just looking at it objectively, as a presenter, he's going to be there a long time unless there's some big blow up that no one can predict at this moment. He's going to be a formidable thing for the Liberal Party to try and deal with or unseat.
Well, he's popular. I think he's popular because he's populist.
What's wrong with being popular?
Popular is good.
Yes, I think so.
We love to be loved.
Beats the alternative.
But you've also got to get on with governing the state. So I think he's populist in the sense that he's got, people talk about the bread and circus. And bread and circuses are fine because people love bread and circuses. But we've also got to get on with core business. So I think if you put all the bread and circuses to one side, if you put the footy and the golf and the car race, and you think, oh, well, that's all fun and good, that's really easy. It's just throwing money at something. Any premier can do that very easily. But if you put that to one side, and you think, well, are we better off now than we were a couple of years ago? Have our taxes gone down? Is our cost of living better? Is the hospital ramping fixed? On a lot of key metrics, indeed on the Premier's own key metrics. So I do think the gloss starts to come off of a populist leader when people realise he's not delivering.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been following this Nick McKenzie 9-age story about the CFMEU.
Extraordinary.
Isn't it? The Sergeant Schultz defence of I know nothing. And this has been going on for longer. It's been going on forever. Corruption and standovers and bullying and bribing and brown paper bags filled with money and costs of infrastructure going through the roof unnecessarily because all of this corruption is just added on to the cost of the build.
Yeah, I think a lot of Australians were probably pretty shocked by what they read in the Financial Review, by what they watched on 60 Minutes. But I wasn't.
No, look, I've been on my little podcast and my posting on Facebook. I've been and on radio for 40 years before that. I've been talking about stuff like this. You can't just turn a blind eye.
No, and you're not the only one talking about it. And
but I can't do anything about it. These people can do something about it.
Correct. So Parliament basically for the entire time I've been in the Parliament.
Good.
And we've seen sort of industry bodies like Master Builders coming out and talking about this sort of behaviour.
Do you know I tried to get the Master Builders Association on the program this morning?
Is that right?
They couldn't find anyone to talk.
Well, look, have been calling out this behaviour for some time. We've been talking about it a lot in the Parliament, and I think it's got worse over the last couple of years in particular, I think, for two reasons. One, here in South Australia, we saw the arrival of this John really militant brand of union with the arrival of the Victorian branch of the CFMEU taking over the South Australian branch. They came in and they came in loudly. Remember, they plastered their propaganda all over the trams. They had these bizarre social media videos yelling and screaming down the camera. So that we were worried about. And these are the very same people that Nick McKenzie's investigation deals with.
And you're aware that along with their entry into South Australia, there was a 6-figure donation made by the CFMEU to the Labor Party.
Donated over
$125,000. There's $125,000.
Peter Malinowskis's.
Well, that should be given back, should it not?
Well, and it has been.
It has been given back.
But the question is why it was even accepted in the first place.
Yeah.
And it just shows why you see inaction from Labor governments on the unions. I mean, Peter Malinowskis for goodness sake. We've got a union boss running the state, and that's irregular. That hasn't happened in a long time.
Well, he should know what goes on. It shouldn't be a surprise to him.
Well, it really shouldn't be. And so you see a former union boss in Peter Malinowskis saying, oh my goodness, I had no idea any of this was happening. You see sort of Tony Burke, oh wow, what horrible people are leading the CFMEU. I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
Gee.
It sort of beggars belief that this party that is basically run by the unions.
It's owned by the unions.
The Labor Party is sort of the political arm of the unions. Wouldn't have any idea of the sort of behaviour. I think the other reason it's got worse recently is with the dismantling of the federal ABCC, the Australian Building Construction Commission. This was the sort of watchdog.
Cop on the beat.
Cop on the beat, exactly right. So got dismantled
at the request of the CFMEU.
Of the CFMEU, exactly right.
But to his credit, the Prime Minister did kick John Setka out of the party.
Well, so he should. But, I mean, if you put all this sort of thuggish behaviour to one side, it has a real impact on the cost of everything.
Yes, it does.
The last time that the ABCC was abolished, so this has already happened, Rudd abolished the ABCC, and then it was brought back, and now it's gone again. The last time it disappeared, there's some analysis that shows the cost of building anything cent. You know, this is every school we build, every hospital we build, goes up by 30%. That's just the premium that we have to pay for the unions.
We had former Senator John Quirk, Labor Senator John Quirk, on the program earlier, and he was telling us about the REM Centre. Now, you'll probably be to remember when the REM Centre went up, but it involved the purchase of buildings along North Terrace and Rundle Mall. Very big project. I can't remember anything quite so big in South Australia. And a lot of construction took years to do. But it cost maybe 100 million or a bit less to build it because of union shenanigans. And the Senator was telling us about some of them this morning, like the, what was it, the dim sim allowance. Because the workers, the food was really having a bad effect on the workers. So they had to get a $300 a week addition to their salary to compensate them for the smell of Chinese food. And then there were all sorts of things like concrete pours that were stopped in the middle because they weren't getting, which required the whole thing to be jacked up again.
They also had a poetry break, I think.
Oh, they had a poetry break. Yeah, there is actually a bloke who wanders around. I've spoken to him once years ago, and he's a kind of a rough and ready builders, labourers. He writes all this free verse, and he stands up on a box, and all the guys gather round.
Speaker's
Corner kind of thing, but everything has to stop on the building site while they have their poetry session. Oh, God.
There's a long list of absurd examples, isn't there?
But that building cost $1 billion, and because the company went bankrupt, of course, when the building was eventually sold, the REM Centre, which is now the Myer Centre, it sold for about $110 million, a tenth of what it cost to build. And you can't tell me that the cost to build influenced by all those shenanigans.
Same happened in Brisbane, Myer Centre in Brisbane.
Yeah, and as the Senator said, it's 333 Collins Street was another example of exactly the same thing.
I think again it's the master builders, but they came out with a figure of what the ABCC was going to cost the economy, and it was, I think, nearing $50 billion.
Well, they should be bloody well more vocal.
Well, they should be screaming it from the rooftops. What we've done in state parliament is actually try to introduce legislation to plug the gap, have a construction industry watchdog level, and that gets voted down by the Labor Party every week when we try and pass it in parliament. And it's little surprise it does, because again, it's the political arm of the union movement who accept hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of donations from the union movement.
What's happening with polling in the state. Is the Liberal Party faring fairly well?
I feel like when I was a kid, there used to be polling in the newspaper for state politics every second weekend.
Yeah, I haven't seen any.
I don't think anyone does it anymore, seemingly.
Ah.
Look, I don't know is the answer. I, as a new member of Parliament, sort of have tried to really just be out in the local community, gauging opinion, seeking views. I can only do my job to represent them if I know what they're making them tick. So for me, it's about working really hard and trying to put the case forward that this isn't a good government. Your taxes have never been higher. Your cost of living's never been worse.
But how would you fix it?
And your prime promise is broken. Well, I mean, you can fix it.
Be Tom Playford. Fix it.
Yeah, and I get that, and that's often the retort you get on and 2 years out from an election is probably a bit of a pivot where you'll see the Liberal Party start to sort of shift into being more of an alternative government as we start to outline. We spent the last 2 years, I mean, it'd be ridiculous if we had policy 2 years ago. They all just got fundamentally rejected at the last election. So you had to spend a bit of time and building that policy base again. And that's what we've been working away and doing. And that's what we want to try and start doing over the next couple of years is releasing some policy. We've just done that. This budget around tax policy in particular, announcing reform to payroll tax, basically to abolish it for small businesses, which I think is really
shocking tax that you tax people for giving somebody a job.
It's a tax on jobs.
Oh, my God.
It just makes no sense.
Makes no sense. It's like taxing sunlight or good health. Let's tax good health. You tax it, you'll get less of it. Subsidise it, you'll get more of it.
I am loving it. It's a steep learning curve at the start, I've got to say. It's much like starting any new job in a way. You've got to learn who's who.
Oh, sure.
You've got to learn how to get things done. It's a bit different, I guess, to other new jobs because everyone's watching. Sometimes everyone's recording what you're saying.
Oh, yes. And tap dance around that.
I don't. You do what you need to do, but it's different in that sense. It's also different because there's sort of no how-to guide to being a member of Parliament.
No.
There's no.
Well, just be yourself.
I think that's exactly right. Don't sort of have someone saying this is what you should be doing and this is how you do it. So you sort of it's a learning process. And every day I almost learn more what I can do with the role as well, which is exciting because it's giving back to the community that I love.
I've got one problem with the Liberal Party, I suppose. I can't understand your leader. I can't understand.
The next interpreter.
Yeah, well, I like the Scottish accent. Don't get me wrong, but I can't understand.
I like his docile tunes.
Does he play the bagpipes or anything?
No, I don't think he plays the bagpipes. He hasn't tried to feed me haggis or anything like that.
No.
Give that I think so. Yeah, I think he took on an enormously difficult job. Opposition leader is genuinely the toughest job in politics, I think. And taking it on at a time where you've just been decimated at the state election makes it especially difficult.
Yes, I know. It must be a heartbreaking sort of business. You're either cock of the walk or you're running around like a feather duster. It's a cruel business.
Well, let's hope you get to experience it all.
Oh, look, I'm sure you will. You're in it for the long haul, in other words.
I hope so. I've been in for a couple of years. I was there for 21 years. I think before her, it was Graham Ingerson there for 20 years, and before him it was David Tonkin.
Well, I've had them all on my program.
How wonderful.
Over the years.
So, big shoes to fill.
No, well, God bless you. I hope you have a very successful career. Go out there and turn it all back. Do you know that Tom Playford in the Premier's office? I don't know how many people are in the Premier's office now. I'd hate to think 50 or 60 or something. He had 3 people in the Premier's office.
Incredible.
There was Barbara, his secretary, and he had a batman who was with him in the First World War. I love telling the story because the batman, only had one arm. Doubled as the doorman.
Right.
But Tom basically did the whole thing himself. Yeah. But that's when we did things. We set up the Electricity Trust and the Housing Trust.
How much he achieved, exactly.
Just amazing.
Yeah, no, it's inspiring.
So
maybe me and Ned can get the job done.
Well, this is your young offsider.
That's right.
Is he all right to work with?
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Behaves himself? You keep an eye on him?
Yes.
All right. Good luck to you all.
Thank you so much.
Take care. It's wonderful to have you. Member for Bragg, Jack Batty, ladies and gentlemen.